The Mecha Ventorus, the badass brawling machine from the Unzan Research Center, and the mecha of the equally badass Master Ju Chong. The mecha that never ever got a price reduction and is still 2,800 in gold today. This machine boasts the largest model in game, and for some reason, ranks only 5th in durability. You think you're ready to main Venturus? Hey yo, what's up? This is once again your host Echo, and we're gonna talk all about the Mecha Venturus. If you find this video entertaining, or even just at least informative, I urge you to please do drop a like and subscribe to the channel, because I'm planning on doing more videos like this for other SMC mechas down the line. Of course, timestamps are provided down below, and I do admit that I talk a little slow, even for my own taste. So if you're like me, feel free to watch the video at times 1.5 speed. So let's get on with it. First, let's cover the basic stats of Venturus. This machine serves the role of being burst and an assault kind of mecha, but as stated earlier, he can also serve as an off tank with his 3,400 total durability, ranking 5th next only to Hot Seal, Trio, Doomlight, and Caramel respectively. Venturus is somewhat unique thanks to his ability to switch between two forms that drastically changes how he looks and how he functions. His default mode, being what's called the cruising form, is where Venturus glides along the battlefield with the swagger of an absolute Chad, provided with a well-rounded kit that allows him to engage in fights across a variety of distance. Alternatively, this mecha also has what's called the Berserker Dragon form, which gives the mecha higher damage output, a larger AoE and projectile, and the important ability to traverse vertically, but at the cost of his primary attack having like a considerably larger spread. We'll be calling this one the burst mode or the dragon form along the video. His primary attack is what's called the Gale Missile, and its behavior changes depending on what form you're currently in. For the cruising form, Vento sends out 4 tightly packed projectiles of Gale Missiles, with each individual projectile being represented in his clip counter of 36, allowing you to shoot up to 9 times before having to reload. And for the duration of his dragon form, Vento instead sends out 5 very scattered projectiles of Gale Missile and gives you an access to a bottomless pool of projectile. Without headshot multipliers, if all projectiles hit from 20 meter on cruising form, this attack deals a total of 272 damage, with each projectile dealing 68 damage individually. And on the dragon form, this attack deals a total of 325 damage, with each projectile dealing 65 damage individually. His secondary ability is an attack with an explosive energy spear called Katabatic Power. It's a devastating ability, not just in terms of damage, but also its large 15-meter AoE by default. It deals a total of 387 damage with an instant cast, which can be further improved up to 494 damage if you charge it up, with a total charge time of 1 second. Being on dragon form, however, eliminates this necessity to ever charge it up, as it already gives you full damage from the get-go. This skill has a cooldown of 8 seconds. For his tactical skill, he's got one that varies wildly between the two forms. On the cruising form, this skill allows Vento to dash horizontally at the direction of your joystick upon casting, behaving similarly to Arthur's tactical skill. But on the dragon form, this skill instead allows Venturus to perform a 3D dash heading to where your crosshair is, while dealing melee damage at the end. Being on either of the two forms, this skill carries out the ability to store 2 charges at a time, allowing you to chain dashes more effectively to chase an opponent down or reposition out of a sticky situation. Each charge of this skill uses 5 fuel per use and has a cooldown of 8.5 seconds. For his jumps, he gets a normal jump regardless of which form. Each jump consumes 18 fuel, which means that with a total of 100 fuel reserves, you can perform up to 5 jumps and 1 dash before you have to wait for your fuel to regenerate. Mechanics of his Berserk Dragon form. Venturus gets an extra button to switch into the dragon form from his default cruising form. This dragon form switch button has a cooldown of 20 seconds, but the good thing with that is that it starts as soon as you press it, and the duration of which Bento can hold the maintained dragon form is 8 seconds. So by default, you're gonna have a downtime of 12 seconds between each dragon form. I say by default because there is a module that can modify the amount of time that you can stay in this form. And speaking of modules, I think it's about time that we discuss the modules and the tech loadout that I personally run with this mecha and would also strongly recommend to you guys. For Vento's attack module, I am running the Morning Breeze, which increases the projectile speed for Ventorus, while the Fighting Dragon attack module seems decent enough. Upon testing it, it actually revealed that the module is quite frankly useless. I'll let you see for yourself with this clip. Alright, so I'm standing 15 meters directly in front of this Firestar right now, okay? And I have equipped with me the Morning Breeze module, which increases the projectile speed of his primary attack. So from 15 meters, that's where I was standing. Let's try the right click, okay? It reaches all the way to 15 meters with just the Morning Breeze. And now we're gonna equip the Fighting Dragon, which increases the AoE supposedly by up to 5 meters. So let's test that, okay? I'm equipping purple right now. And this bar right here, this line right here, is kind of like the indicator of where 20 meter is. But it's safe if we like just fit it a little closer, because you'll see it's kind of like pointless actually. Bam, nothing. If we were to like move it just a little closer to like the marker, the 15 meter marker, nothing. Nothing at all. So that's kind of like the point why I'm choosing Morning Breeze instead of Fighting Dragon, because Fighting Dragon's kinda useless. Oh no, my marker expired. But yeah, I'm using Morning Breeze, and that's 15 meters. So, myth busted, I guess. For Vento's defense module, and this is the one that I've been talking about, the Berserk Dragon form, I haven't slotted the Demonic Dragon defense module. This module allows me to hold melee fights a little longer and gives me more room for error for whenever I prematurely switch to dragon form a couple of seconds too early before engagement. For the propulsion module, I have the Berserk Dragon propulsion equipped, with the dragon form being reliant on close range melee brawling. Having better movement speed allows me to close in on my enemies for an all-out assault, or at least maintain a distance against a fleeing opponent. Now, with one of the more recent patches on SMC, core modules for Ventorus has been decisive. It used to be a no-brainer to pick up his old core module too, but I won't delve to that anymore as it no longer represents the current build of the game. This time, however, I now prefer the utility that Core Module 1 gives to Ventorus. Core Module 1 allows Ventorus to sense out a projectile dealing a negligible damage whenever dashing in dragon form. But more importantly this time, it now also instantly fills up one charge for his mobility skill, which, as mentioned earlier, has a relatively long cooldown of 8.5 seconds. I'll show you a footage of how to better take advantage of this later in the video. Now we're done with the modules that I run for Ventorus, let's move on to the tech mods that I run for him. I still believe that tech mods only ever give out negligible percentage buffs in the heat of the battle, but whatever little helps, still helps, I suppose. With the unique kit of Ventorus allowing him to change his operating range, and with him relying exclusively on the compounded damage of his pellets, for the red tech modules I decided to slap onto this bad boy are focused on rate of fire and accuracy, namely the assault program, bombardment chip, and improved chamber. With the blue tech mods, I have put in consideration that with the relatively long cooldown of his tactical ability, I decided to augment it with quick cooldown plan and engine boost, and then for the third slot, I'm just equipping concurrent power supply that gives me slight improvement in movement speed. And since we've already covered the stats of Ventorus, what modules I use, and what tech mods I have in place, I guess we've reached the non-structured portion of the video, where we discuss what kind of moves and decisions you should be making if you want to main Ventorus. For the most part, majority of the modules in this game can be made to work if you know how to take advantage of the edge that it gives you. But with the build that I explained earlier, here's how I take advantage of it. Majority of our modules take advantage of the Berserk Dragon form, but do not, however, worry about mid to long engagement too much. This is where our augments in accuracy for our tech mods and the increased projectile speeds for Morning Breeze comes in handy. Just make sure that you resist the temptation to pop in Dragon form every time you see an opponent from far away, as this will significantly reduce your damage capability. Remember, Cruising form for mid to long range, and Dragon form for like an all-out melee assault. Second point I want to talk about is that you should take advantage of the physics in game with Ventorus. Not a lot of people know this, and even I learned this a little late, like with testing him. But during his cruising form, if you perform a dash, I told you that it's gonna propel you to the direction of your joystick. But did you know that if you perform a jump just before it ends, it can effectively increase the distance that your dash can propel you? It defaults to like 27 meters, but it can go up to double of that, around like 53, 55, 52 meters, depending on what second you time your jump. Taking advantage of this, along with the new utility of Core Module 1, allows you to cover insane distances that is unexpectedly fast for a well-known slow mecha. The third point I want to say is that with the recent changes for Vento, they made it so that Katabatic power only has a 1 second cooldown instead of the old 1.5 second. I still say with certainty that you're still better off with not charging it at all. Unless of course you're in a position to surprise your opponent, or if it ever happens that you need to recenter your aim. Remember, while fully charging it up can add 107 damage for the energy ball, you are also choreographing to the enemies where you want to send it, making the already slow projectile even more predictable. Meanwhile, if you take advantage of its extremely short cast time and sandwich it between your flurry of attacks, it has more chance of being ignored by your opponents. Our fourth point is gonna be for the older Ventorus players. I've always used Core 2 just as you guys back then because it allowed me to close in the gap with Dragon form, find cover, and then pop right back in thanks to the insane cooldown reduction, allowing us to like just have a 4-second downtime between Dragon forms. Now that's no longer possible because even if we do get purple defense module, we still have to suffer through a solid 10-second downtime before we can pop our Dragon form back then. Now, they've rebalanced everything and Core 2 just increases the damage, and Core 1 increases your mobility. And back then, I used Core 2 as a mobility enhancer. So I think with like the current nature of Core 1, it has the possibility to even be better than Core 2. I think like traversing the map, Core 1 is already a little bit better than old Core 2. So while recording footages, I think I've come to the conclusion that I can now safely say that Core 1 is a safe pick if you were using Core 2 just like how I did back then. Point number 5. Whether it be you're on cruising form or you're on Dragon form, Vento does not suffer from movement penalty when shooting. He does, however, still slow down when reloading, so to circumvent this, you're gonna want to pop in on Dragon form to continue smoothly with your assault. Use this to your advantage when you desperately need to reposition, especially when there's a sniper mecha camping a certain angle. You have a lot of pellets in your arsenal, and it can be used to confuse or at least slightly distort the vision of your enemies. Point number 6. If you're having trouble trying to flush out campers out of a building, switching to Dragon form might benefit you thanks to the larger projectile and AoE it delivers with every shot. Point number 7. This may be a no-brainer to most of you, especially if you're coming from other mechs with large AoE, but you're gonna wanna aim your Katabatic power slightly downwards or to the floor closest to your target. This may yield you less damage overall, especially if they're at the edge of AoE, but at least you can have a more consistent DPS rather than annoyingly missing your shot with your enemy simply adjusting a couple of pixels horizontally. Okay, basic stats are down, modules are done, terminals are done, and then some of the key tips that I've mentioned are already out there. It's time to talk about pilot skill and sponsor terminals. I saved this one for last because there's a lot of RNG and personal preferences involved in this one. for pilot skills, I personally run Juchong's skill at this point for almost all of my runs, whatever mecha it is I use. But if you were to partner it with a deadly AoE of Ventorus, this would allow you to just absolutely minimize the risk of having to manually flush out building rats by having to demech yourself. And it's also important to note that the damage of Juchong's skill bypasses shields and instead damages Mecha's durability directly. Alternatively, Rom's skill also synergizes well with the kit of Ventorus. If you're feeling courageous and thinking that you can take on 2 or 3 mechas at a time, having Rom's skill to shred cooldown for your mobility skill would definitely help you achieve that a little more realistically. And there's also tanking related skills like Ning's, Ivan's, or Vita's skill, which can help you last a little longer for juggling those solo fights or holding off enemies while your teammates get in position. Now let's move on to sponsor terminals. And we were talking about Ivan's skill earlier. If you're a fan of this skill, even if you're not, I highly recommend you to prioritize getting this very important sponsor terminal. And that would be instant recharge. With everything discussed earlier, you all should know by now that Vento shines in short-range melee brawl. And if you're in a situation like that, having the ability to instantaneously pop in 700 hit points or more if you're running Ivan's skill can certainly decide whether you're walking out of that fight victorious or if you're gonna be ejecting sky high. Next priority I would have to say is Fiery Instinct. This one just basically allows you to augment the overall mobility of Ventorus, which he certainly needs, having the largest in-game model and all of that. For the third slot, you can just go YOLO with this one, but I do have 3 recommendations. Killing Machine. As every projectile of Ventorus counts as its own entity, it would work well with Ventorus' nature. I just don't have this on priority because for you to take advantage of this, you'd already reach the point of being straight up overkill. Next one would be Wave Up Recovery. Being a risky melee mecha, you're always at the risk of getting destroyed. Like, always. A lot. So having that practically free 1 recharger from Wave Up Recovery would come in handy. Another non-priority because it's useless on Ace Time. Last, but certainly not the least, I also recommend Race Against Time. It's just an overall good terminal. Like, it's good. I don't need to explain it. Don't sleep on this one. And with all of this information being dumped into your encephalon, I can safely say that you, my friend, are now ready to main the Emperor Dragon, the badass brawler mecha, the closest we can get to a melee fighting mecha, Ventorus. This has been your host, Echo. Stay tuned and please do drop a sub because I plan on doing more videos just like this one. And I also stream regularly and I basically just info dumped in all of those. You know, just with a little less structure. So, yeah. Peace out, pare.